I think you have all of the tracks mislabeled and you're hearing a different album. Welcome back to Listography. I'm Ryan here with Jason and Joe. We are going to do a remasters listography of the great Radiohead. I'm hosting this one because Radiohead is my all-time favorite group. I am a traditional cliche of a Radiohead. They are a theology and religion, and I buy into everything Thom Yorke has to say. I am mesmerized by everything Jonny Greenwood does. They're the best. I love them. I know you guys at least like them. Joe, what do you got? Radiohead.
Well, at one point in my life, they were my favorite band, and then they betrayed me, and I haven't forgiven them since. I'll have more to say on this subject, but I still like them.
It took me a long time to get into Radiohead. I was a late bloomer, I guess, but I like most of their albums now a good bit. There's a couple that are still kind of difficult listens for me, but on the most part, I enjoy them.
Classic undersell of the century. They're the best. All right, so we're going to go through 9 studio albums. Radiohead, before we get into their discography, is also a band that's known to have comprised and put out just a ton of B-sides and, leaking bootlegs of stuff. So they're really good to their fan base. That's going to play into my stuff later on when we do our songs list. I had to just discard all of the B-sides just to limit my options. But 9 studio albums starting in 1993 through 2016. Joe, do you want to start us off with your number 9?
Sure, I'll start off number 9. And this album, I just don't get it all. It's 2011's The King of Limbs. I really fervently dislike this album. I will never listen to it again. It's everything that I didn't want in a Radiohead album is basically in this album. It's all the kind of electronic beats and boops and just a total, laid back sound, but there's just nothing interesting going on here for me. I really can't get into it. There's nothing here for me.
All right. So for my least favorite, now I've of course done this list before. If you go back on the channel and check it out, you can see how I rated them maybe 2 years ago it was. A couple changes. One of those changes is coming right off the bat. I've flipped the bottom 2, but that's not the only change that will happen. I'm going to go at the very bottom with Amnesiac. Everything that I said about it in the prior video still applies. I don't really like it any less, but I think I like King of Limbs a little more now than I used to. With Amnesiac, I think the problem with it lies in that it's more about the sonics and the textures and the synths and the experimentation. I feel like the emphasis has been really taken off of the songwriting too much. I wish the songs were more at the core of this record. And it's an interesting sounding record, but I don't know, it doesn't really captivate me in any way.
Well, it's hard to listen to my good friends bash my 9 children, but I get it. My number 9, my least favorite Radiohead album is the absolutely terrific Pablo Honey, their debut record. It's just not as good as the other 8. There's so much good stuff on here. I can even get into Creep, even though they hate it. I Love You, Thinking About You. It's got a lot of really good youthful, just kind of that classic 90s whininess that Tom does, and Johnny's killing it with a guitar attack with Ed O'Brien. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because I'm going to talk a lot later, but it's a really good record. Pablo Honey, number 9.
Okay, yes, I agree with you that Pablo Honey is a very good record, which is why it's way further up my list. I have a number 8, Amnesiac. I think Jason pretty much nailed it. It is, other than maybe the 3 kind of actual songs, Pyramid Song, I Might Be Wrong, and Knives Out, I think are all pretty strong. I think Pyramid Song is really beautiful, but it's kind of an extension of Kid A, but kind of the wrong parts of Kid A, I think. It's just more of kind of the electronic-ness. It just doesn't feel like real kind of fleshed out songs to me for most of the album. It's an interesting listen. I don't dislike it like I dislike King of Limbs.
All right, so number 8, I have King of Limbs. It was my number 9 the last time I did the list. It's kind of a record that comes in two halves. The first half is really difficult for me to get into. A lot of really polyrhythms and multiple drum kits playing at one time. They're kind of just pushing the limits, I think, and seeing how much dissonance their fan base can take. That said, the second half of the record, I like the last four songs a lot. And on the strength of those four tracks, it moves up a spot on my list.
Yeah, I kind of get the criticism of King of Limbs, which is why it is my number 8. I do think that I like, like I said, cliche. I can get into the double drum lines and the polyrhythmic stuff. So right off the bat, In Bloom, I was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. But you're right, the second half is better. Codex is absolutely phenomenal. Lotus Flower is a really good pop song. I'm with you. The first 4 songs are some of the weaker songs Radiohead has ever done, especially in kind of that post-Benz era. But I do really like Little by Little. But yeah, I think this is just kind of I think especially after In Rainbows, it was totally an album that I don't think anyone expected them to make. And it also kind of, like I said, I mentioned the B-side. Some of the other stuff that they were recording, putting out on the Basement stuff, and they were doing live and bootlegs are as good or maybe even better than some of this stuff here on King of Limbs. So, I still really like it, but I think it could have been a lot better. It also feels just kind of short and rushed. I do like it more than Pablo Honey. It's a bit more interesting to me, and I think, like Codex and Lotus Flower are awesome. So, number 8, King of Limbs.
Do you guys know that Twilight Zone where the guy wakes up and everybody has pig faces?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it turns out now he's the weird one. That's how I feel about In Rainbows, which is my number 7. Everyone loves it. I don't understand why. I cannot wrap my head around it. I'm not one to go with the critics on everything, but this album just has like universal acclaim, and I just cannot listen to it. Going back and kind of re-listening to everything for this, I kind of started, I can see 15-step, Body Snatchers, Nude, Weird Fishes, maybe, kind of, growing on me. But the rest of the album, I do not understand the love for this album at all. And I don't know what else to say about it. I don't like it, and I don't want to listen to it.
That is so mind-blowing to me, because the albums you have yet to mention, In Rainbows is so much more straightforward. Like a song like Jigsaw Falling Into Place, just like almost like a straight-up rock song for them. I don't get it.
It's just so boring. Give me the weird sonic textures of Kid A over In Rainbows. Just kind of soporific. It doesn't work for me. Number 7, In Rainbows.
I agree that you don't always go with the critics, but you have been using that as a defense with some of our lithographies, like Hotel California. So you can't play both sides of the coin here, Joe.
60s and 70s were, I don't know, better for my critical acclaim, I guess. I don't know. Once you get into the 2000s, I kind of diverge off into my own little path.
The critics ain't what they used to be.
There you go.
Number 7 for me is going to be Pablo Honey with Cram on this. I like it a lot. I think it's really good. Within the context of their discography, it comes across as being a little weak, considering how much they would really like further develop and really go in a lot of different interesting directions. But just within the context of like Britpop, I think it's a really good record. A lot of really good songs. I like Anyone Can Play Guitar a lot. Vegetable. It's a pretty solid record, quite enjoyable, but not anywhere close to, the things they would achieve later on.
Yeah, it's really amazing to listen to the first track on Pablo Honey and then the first track on Moonshaped Pool and just be like, how is this the same band? It's really incredible. My number 7 is going to be Amnesiac. This is a really good album. It's just not a great Radiohead album because Kid A exists, and it is kind of just like the stepsister of Kid A. They were all kind of recorded at the same time. That's kind of my biggest criticism of it. It's the only album that sounds a lot like another Radiohead album, and I think they're brilliant at every album kind of standing on its own in its own accord. That said, I don't think you guys are giving some of the songwriting as much credit as they do. Even the weirder sounding stuff, I think to the core are really good songs, like Packed Sardines is really cool. Dollar and Cents is a really cool, moody, jazzy type thing that has sort of like a Dark Side of the Moon vibe to it. But the 3 that Joe mentioned, are awesome. I Might Be Wrong, Knives Out, and what was the other one you mentioned, Joe?
Pyramid Song.
Yeah, Pyramid Song is great. I think it's fantastic. It's got kind of that turn of the millennium feel where they're, kind of getting into that digital age before anyone else is. But I do think it's just not quite as good as Kid A. But the sonic textures, and I love some of the mixing of Thom's vocals, especially like on I Might Be Wrong and Dollars and Cents. And I don't really care for this rendition of Morning Bell. I think it's much better on Kid A. But really, other than that, nothing that I'm too disappointed with on this.
Alrighty, well, moving on to me. My number 6, I have Kid A. I'm very mixed feelings about Kid A. I think it's a very cool album. I think it's very unique, very original. I think it's very well done if you like that kind of music, which I don't. But like, I don't mind listening to it because it's so kind of like sonically different, and it's such like a seismic shift. I mean, I can't think of any other band who would go from something like OK Computer to this in 2 years, 3 years maybe, and just completely reinvent their sound. I wish they hadn't, but I can respect them. I love the opening notes of everything in its right place, that the chord or whatever it comes into. Other than that, I love Optimistic because it's kind of got that OK Computer vibe, but I don't know. I'm not going to listen to this album really ever. I'll listen to a couple songs here and there, but it's just not one that I'm going to put down and, sit through 47 minutes of this when I could be listening to, Hail to the Thief or Pablo Honey or The Bends or, one of their, in my opinion, much superior albums. So I respect the hell out of you, Radiohead, but I don't like Kid A that much. So
number 6 for me is going to be A Moon-Shaped Pool. I do like this album quite a bit. I think a lot of the tracks on it are very strong. However, it falls a little lower on my list because I find that I need to sort of really be in a specific sort of mood to enjoy it. It's a very somber record, not a pick-me-up at all. So it's good in certain contexts, but not one of my absolute favorite. And I think from this point on, everything else is really strong.
I also have a Moon-Shaped Pool at number 6. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I haven't really looked at 2016 as a year, but this is likely a very good candidate for Album of the Year for me then. Right off the bat, you're in different territory than King of Limbs with the strings and, Burn the Witch. And I think this album probably has the most Jonny Greenwood influence in a while, mainly because he's been doing a lot of musical composition, scoring, and stuff like that. And I really like the texture of this album. I think it is very kind of somber and moody, but I love how there's kind of this anxious, tense feeling throughout. And I kind of think a lot of the album is about anxiety. Full Stop, Dex Dark, Burn the Witch, pretty much everything on it, I think, is a A+ song. Yeah, I think it's great. But the 5 that I have ahead of it are likely all in my top 20 albums of all time. So, yeah, that's the territory that they're just missing out on.
I have A Moon-Shaped Pool as my number 5. And I think, in terms of me sitting down and, listening to a Radiohead album, from here on in, these are the ones I want to hear, and I can just listen all the way through and not kind of be annoyed by what Radiohead have become. This one, it brings back some of the kind of menace and weird alienness, I think, of their stronger works, especially OK Computer. Burn the Witch kind of feels like maybe closer to OK Computer or Hail to the Thief. Definitely a shift kind of back in my direction of the Radiohead sound I like. The strings are great. The first 4 and the last 4 songs are incredibly strong, in my opinion. I think if they had left out maybe the 4 in the middle, it would have been a better album, but that's kind of nitpicking. I love the strings and the numbers, how they just kind of come out of nowhere. Really reminiscent of Madman Across the Water style, which I really love. This is just a really good album, and it's a really nice return to form and gives me hope again for Radiohead. Definitely. It was in my top 10 in 2016, and it might be higher now once we get to that year. But yeah, it's a really good album. I'm glad they came back with something like this.
I forget exactly where I had it in 2016. I think around the 30 mark, something like that. But anyways, moving on. What are we on? 5? Number 5 for me is going to be Hail to the Thief. I think this is a really strong record, a nice bounce back from Amnesiac. I think they were starting to get a little carried away with the electronics. And on this record, they bring back some more acoustic instrumentation. I think the songs are each treated they each get their own individual treatment as to what suits the song best. So there's a good variety on this record. I do, for some reason, tend to forget about this record all the time, and I don't listen to it that often, but I do think it's pretty good. I love Myxomatosis. I think that's probably my favorite track on it. It's a good record.
If you had said, yo, Cramser, make a list of the songs on Hail to the Thief you think Jason likes most, Myxomatosis would have been dead last.
Why?
Why? Because you're always someone that says I preach craft and songwriting first above all else, and that's just kind of just like a big like jam bass electronic extravaganza. It's awesome. Good for you. Yeah. All right.
I disagree. I think that's a good piece of songwriting, actually.
Yeah. I think he did. I believe Tom wrote the bass part, which I think he did a lot on that album. Anyway, we're getting into number 5 for me. Really tough choices coming up for me. Number 5 is In Rainbows. With the critics, Joe, it's absolutely fantastic all the way through, not a weak part on it. It's totally different territory for them too, with kind of the atmosphere and the mood. It's really bassy and groovy. It's probably the first album they do that kind of you can dance a little bit to. They drop a lot of like those really grandiose philosophical views, and it's just kind of this downright like sensual, seductive album, a bit romantic, probably the most romantic thing they've done since the Bends at this point. And it's interesting for me because I didn't get into Radiohead till about 2003, right around when Hail came out. But I pretty much listened to them all in order. Kind of listened to Pablo Honey and the Bends and loved them, and then listened to OK Computer and hated it at first because it wasn't the Bends. Then listened to Kid A and Amnesiac and hated it because it wasn't OK Computer. Same with Hail to the Thief. This was the first album that I was like pumped where it came out, and I listened to it and I was just absolutely blown away and in love with it. I was, it won me over instantly. It's some of just the sensuality in it and the rhythm is just so erotic at times. I love some of the falsettos he's doing, and what's it called, Reckoner. All I Need is really haunting and beautiful, but it's also got some really upbeat stuff like Body Snatchers, Jigsaw, House of Cards. The only little gripe I have is that this version of Videotape I don't like as much as the bootleg and the live performance they were doing a couple years before they put it on this album. I still like it, and I think it works as a closer for the album, but I kind of want that live feel that they used to do with kind of the 3-tap on the snare, totally different drum part for this. But I think it's absolutely fantastic. Would be most people's best album, but they're 5th.
All right. I don't get it. Number 4, for me, I got Pablo Honey, an album I do get. I get this because it's just straightforward, good old-fashioned rock and roll. 1993, it's just unpretentious, just them rocking out for 10, 12 tracks. I think You is just a phenomenal first, side one, track one, great kind of intro to the band. Anyone can play guitar, Ripcord, Vegetable, just all good songs, Creep, sure. It's just a good album. It's one I can just kind of throw on and listen to. And there's a couple maybe anonymous songs towards the end, but I have no complaints about this album at all. I really just think it's great.
And I'm glad you mentioned Ripcord, because I don't know if you remember, but for about 2 hours in Claire's basement, we were in a band called Ripcord.
We were. It was awesome. I always think about it when I listen to this album.
Me too.
Number 4 for me is going to be Kid A. Again, I think maybe the focus is drifting a little bit from the songs, but I think the songs are still really strong on this record. And I'm with Joe. I really appreciate the ambition of this record. I like all the sort of synthy, icy soundscapes. I think they're really cool. Overall, I think it's a very good record. I like a lot of the tracks on it, like Optimistic and Idiotech in particular. I like Morning Bell a lot. I think the version on this record is far superior to the version on Amnesiac. And yeah.
All right. For number 4 for me, my 16-year-old version of myself was watching, he'd kick my ass, but I'm going with The Bends at number 4. Breaks My Heart. It's one of the best albums of all time. It's just awesome. It's got that classic, almost like 60s wannabe guitar attack. He even mentions how he wished it was the 60s in the album. And his voice on this album sounds absolutely fantastic when he's hitting the high notes, like on Black Star, when he says, "This is killing me." Like, it's just a I don't know many just grungy rock albums that are this beautiful. It's absolutely fantastic, but then it also just kicks ass at times with My Iron Lung and Planet Telex. I don't really care for High and Dry. It's the only song I don't really like. I know it's most people's stuff, but I kind of like how they're kind of setting up OK Computer here at the very end with Street Spirit, this incredibly dark, negative, pessimistic anthem ballad. Tom said he absolutely hates playing it live because it just makes him feel yucky pretty much. Like, it's so dark. But, you know, my highlights are Fake Plastic Trees, Nice Dream. I love the youthful quality on it. You know, in Bones, he says, "I used to fly like Peter Pan." That's, to me, this whole album in a nutshell almost. But then they're going to grow up in their own way on OK Computer. But this one is just so much energy and nice little detail by Jonny on guitar. Before he, you know, really used a lot of different instruments and a lot of different techniques, he was pretty much just the electric guitar lead player and did a lot of really awesome stuff with scratches, and it's awesome. I can't believe it's number 4, but it is.
I'm shook by it being number 4 on your list. I'm going to say that blows my mind. My number 3, however, is going to be Hail to the Thief. It's I was really happy when this album came out because it was kind of, you know, it is a bit of a return to the sound that I loved from them, but it still kind of keeps that weird kind of electronic iciness from Kid A and Amnesiac, but it doesn't kind of, you know, it doesn't take over the whole album. There's a really good mix, I think, of the kind of standard, you know, something like Go to Sleep or 2 + 2 = 5, where it's classic sounding Radiohead. I think it's a good protest album, you know, George Bush, basically. This was the height of the kind of Iraq War. And it's just really, I mean, it has everything that you want in a Radiohead album, I think. It has the acoustic, you know, the high-powered electric guitars, the fuzz, and then it does have weird stuff like Myxomatosis and The Wolf at the Door and Scatterbrain, where it's kind of unsettling, but I think it all works really well, and it's just a really good album for them, and yeah, I like it a lot.
All right, number 3. Used to be my number 1, and now it has fallen to number 3. It is The Bends.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been my number 1 for a very long time. Absolutely love it. I like every single track on it. Everything Cram said about it is accurate. I don't know what it was this time. I don't know. I felt like the other 2 records to me feel more complete. They feel more like who Radiohead truly is, a better representation of them as a band. And I think the songs on those records are just as good as the songs on this record. So with all the songs being at such a high level, I'm going with the ones that have probably the better production and better sound.
It's tough. I know. It's like watching our kids go off to college. It's just Number 3 for me is going to be their masterpiece of art, Kid A. So divisive when it came out. Tom backed it up by saying it's not a pop album, it's not a rock album, it's just a piece of art told through music, and that's exactly what it is. The most credit lies with how it kind of predicted the future, with how sound, and I mean, I know stuff was going on more before that with Portishead and trip hop, but they really put it on the map here and made a cohesive piece of art album, and it's absolutely fantastic. I like how you describe the sounds as kind of these icy soundscapes, a lot of like Brian Eno influence, especially with Tree Fingers is, you know, almost lifted as a Brian Eno song. But I really like the electronica on it. The experimentation's fantastic. And then I love how a lot of these songs translate live. That just goes to show you how good of songs they are on its own, with like Kid A and everything in its right place, work really well live. How to Disappear Completely is just a black hole of somberness and self-reflection that they pull off well. Morning Bell's fantastic. It's a great record all the way through. Optimistic is perfectly in there right in the middle of the album to kind of lift you back up, even though it's not an incredibly uplifting song. It is rocking, and the drums are heavy. It's fantastic. It's a work of art. Terrific. Kid A.
Okay, well, Kicking off the top two, which will it be? I think both of the remaining, if you didn't know, it's OK Computer and the Bends are the only two I haven't listed yet. I think both are just phenomenal, top 25 albums of all time, probably. Definitely the two best albums of the 90s, probably, off the top of my head. So my number two is going to be OK Computer, and it's a very close race. I really love OK Computer. It was probably my number one album of all time at some point in my life. You know, Paranoid Android's a really good track to describe kind of the whole sound. You know, everything is sort of menacing, paranoid. It's almost like Radiohead is like seeing a different world and writing about it in their songs. Like it feels not of this earth sometimes, what they're putting down on OK Computer. And I really like that. It's, you know, almost scary sometimes. Tracks like Karma Police and Paranoid Android, Exit Music for a Film is just such a unique kind of way it builds. And then the, you know, crescendos and then the release. And I think that's kind of what Radiohead kind of mastered, is that build and release formula. I think they mastered a little bit, you know, on the Bends first and kind of brought it into a little more electronic sound here on OK Computer. But it's just, I mean, phenomenal. Thom Yorke sounds amazing. The guitars sound amazing. The fuzz and the kind of like just, it's just, there's not enough words really to describe it. It's just all the way through, except maybe Fit or Happier. That's kind of a weird, always kind of stuck in my craw. But from Airbag to The Tourist, it's just, yeah, a masterwork of sort of moody, paranoid rock and roll, phenomenal stuff.
Well, my number two, Sorry Joe, it's going to be In Rainbows. I'm kind of in the same boat as Cram. This was like one of probably the first Radiohead album that I really loved. I had heard all the ones prior and I liked them, but not to a huge degree, or wasn't a huge fan of them until this record. And I wouldn't say I immediately loved it the way Cram did, but with a few listens and a little bit of time, it really started to grow on me. And then I was able to have greater appreciation for those other albums that came before it. I think there's a nice variety of like really aggressive sort of rocking tunes on here and really soft, kind of some of their most gentle ballads. The production's amazing. Sounds great. Yeah, I like everything about this record. I do kind of agree that the videotape's a little bit of could use a little something else to lift it a bit. You know, those live versions are pretty cool. So yeah, maybe that could be improved upon. But other than that, I think it's a pretty perfect record.
Well said. Number two for me is going to be Hail to the Thief. I think most people that would rank their Radiohead albums would usually go, you know, Ben's, OK Computer, or Kid A. I don't know why this doesn't get the love that it should. My favorite thing about it is how organic it is. You know, with OK Computer and Amnesiac and Kid A, there was like an effort to be ambitious and to come up with something and have a philosophy behind the album. This kind of just seems like they had already evolved into who they are, and this kind of just flushed out naturally. Other than it being political and have kind of this, you know, tense protest kind of effort to it, it really seems like it's an album that they did from the heart and not of the mind, which is why I think it kind of strips back some of the time to more acoustic and just rock and electric stuff. But there is some really cool electronic stuff, some really cool mellow trip hop type stuff like Scatterbrain and Backdrifts, and then some really unconventional songwriting, which they were doing on Kid A and Amnesia. But this, with the kind of more rock formula, is really cool. Like 2+2 is basically just two sections stuck together, and it works so well. The Wolf at the Door, which is, you know, sounds like right from the Beatles, so they're not afraid to kind of just pay their homages where they love them. And then I think just the quality of the songs on this are absolutely awesome. They're There, Go to Sleep, Myxomatosis. There's just so many awesome songs on here, and it's the longest album in most tracks. So we've been kind of throwing out that term, you know, is it their white album, where it's just kind of like the best stuff you want from the artist. And that's kind of how I feel Hail the Thief is. It's a little bit of all the styles you love of Radiohead, and start to finish, it is awesome. And it's got that really nice snarl and crunch back a little bit that kind of went away with OK Computer, and it's back now. It'll disappear a little for In Rainbows, like Joe is upset about, but it's back for Hail the Thief, and it's awesome.
All right, well, my number one, The Bends. I just think this is such a good album. Just pure rock and roll. You know, you got angst and misery and Thom Yorke's angelic voice cutting through it all. And I mean, I'm at a loss for words, and I usually get this when I'm trying to describe something that I really love. This is just such a kind of revolutionary sound that they created, even while it's not a revolutionary sound, but the way they pull it off and the influence that it had is just, you know, the songwriting's just perfect. I think Thom Yorke sounds, you know, he broke out the falsetto for this one. He sounds amazing. Jonny Greenwood's guitar is just perfect. I mean, it has he's doing these like little fills and runs that he never does again, really. But on this album, you know, on songs like The Bends, where it has this like, what Cramser said, like the 60s, kind of early 70s sound, you know, the fuzz, the bass, you know, awesome bass lines throughout. And I like every single song on this album. There's not a single song, just everything works for me. I don't know why exactly. It wasn't the first Radiohead album I listened to. I heard it after The Bends and Kid A. Actually rented it from the library. They still did that back then. And I just put it on one day, and I think on suggestion of my mother, and I was just blown away by the sound texture that comes through on this. I just think it's brilliant. Probably the best album of the 90s. Probably the best rock album. I don't think anything since then would top this. Just a masterpiece. And the critics hated it in America when it came out. Maybe not hated it, but they didn't really like it. Just like to throw that out there. They were underappreciated in their time.
Well, they're certainly not underappreciated anymore, I think. Yeah, so my number one, I don't think any Radioheads really sniff my top 25 at all time. Maybe this one's could sneak into the top 50. I'm not even really sure about that. But I still love it. I think it's great. And that is going to be OK Computer, new number one. I've always loved it. I've always thought it was great. Because we're doing the Colin Greenwood side 3 best basslines video, I was really focused in on that listening through this time. And I would maybe venture to say that this is one of the best bass guitar records of all time. And it may not be something that anyone in any review of OK Computer has ever really talked about in depth, but Colin Greenwood on this record is like the model of the bass player that I would want to be in a band. He's holding down the low end. He's pushing the songs forward all the time. He's also somehow like providing atmosphere and melody. And I mean, he's just doing everything a good bass player should be doing. He's not stepping on anyone's toes, but he's super present and important. It's just perfect. That maybe is what propelled it ahead of the Bends for me. Colin Greenwood.
Yeah, as hard as this list was, it was easy to pick number one because OK Computer to me is the best album of all time. There's not a better album. Great call on the bass playing. I think you can say that about all the vocals and instrumentation. Every song is just kind of perfectly gardened with the right amount of seeds and water and sunshine. No one is stepping on anyone's toes, like you said. Playing is phenomenal. There's not a note or a cymbal tap or anything that is not just well suited for what they're trying to convey. There's something just about the way Thom lets you in, and I think that's kind of what Joe's saying, where you can't really put your finger on it, but there's just something the way he just lets you into his heart and his mind when he's singing, especially on this album and on the Bends. And OK Computers has this awesome, just kind of like welcome to the new age of music. And I love Joe's analogy where it's like an alien came down to Earth and kind of made a report on how they see human life. And at the same time, there's parts of the album where you feel like you're so inside it that you don't know how to deal with your emotions and everything seems vacant and numb at the same time. You know, a song like Let Down kind of makes you feel that way, and Paranoid Android is amazing, and every song on here is just fantastic. I don't even really know how to articulate my thoughts right now. I mean, to me, this album is just how I see the world. It's fantastic. I agree with every little piece of theology and philosophy in here. It just fucking sounds awesome too. Every little computer beep to let you know that you're in a new world is amazing. And I mean, Fit or Happier isn't a song. They're never going to open a show with it, or maybe they will, but you know, it's a piece of the album. And, you know, we're all turning into robots that need to, you know, reflect on our soul. And it's an amazing record. It's beloved by just about everyone, including Joe, thank God. So And there's a reason. It's absolutely fantastic. So those are our Radiohead lists. This was a lot for me to do, guys. But any closing thoughts on the Fab Five?
I think we said most of it. I just go back and I think of all the bands that have been like bands like Muse and Star Sailor and like Travis and Coldplay and pretty much. I mean, I love Muse, but they basically just took the formula that, OK Computer and the Benz set and just, change it up a little bit. But, all of the rock and roll basically that I listened to since these albums came out is very directly influenced by the sound that they have, the build, the release, the falsetto, the, heavy presence of the bass. It's just, they set the standard, I think, for rock and roll in the 2000s and 2010s. For that, we have much to be grateful for.
The influences are everywhere, and I love just the lists of artists that you wouldn't think love Radiohead, like Taylor Swift and Kanye. They're just blown, like, it's just, yeah, it's cool. Jason?
I was just going to applaud Joe for shouting out Star Sailor.
Good call on Star Sailor, my friend. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning into our remaster listography of Radiohead. Let us know what you thought. Give us your Radiohead list. And don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, hit the bell for notifications. And we will see you next time on Listography.